Don't get on the train. There's a bomb in the control cabin. A child's shrill, desperate cry ripped through the celebratory atmosphere at the Grand Central Station. It not only stopped Edward Harris, the king of the railway empire, right before the fateful train ride of his life, but also ignited a terrible truth that was about to be exposed. The one who yelled the warning was Lily, a skinny, grimy one-year-old shoeshine girl who should have been invisible among the elegant crowd. But she wasn't invisible. In that moment, she was the only one who saw the deadly noose tightening around the powerful CEO's neck. And, ironically, the person holding the other end of the rope wasn't some unfamiliar terrorist, but his beautiful young wife and his most trusted friend. This story doesn't begin with a gunshot, but with a warning that would topple an entire empire of lies. Today, the central station was like a colossal stage. Dazzling spotlights illuminated the polished marble floor, reflecting expensive evening gowns and elegant suits. The clinking of champagne glasses blended with hushed conversations and the incessant clicking of camera flashes. Everyone here, from influential politicians to Wall Street tycoons, had come to witness the birth of the Phoenix Line. At the center of this spotlight was Edward Harris. At 40, he had everything others only dreamed of: a multi-billion-dollar corporation, the respect of the business world, and a beautiful, angelic young wife. But only those closest to him knew that behind his successful facade was an unending grief. 10 years ago, his first wife and 5-year-old son were lost forever in a train accident. Since that fateful day, Edward had lived like a somnambulist, pouring all his energy, money, and obsession into building the Phoenix Line. It wasn't just a business project. It was an atonement, a monument he was building from the ashes of his lost happiness, with a vow that no other family would have to endure the pain he had. "Are you okay, my love?" Vanessa, his current wife, gently squeezed his arm. Her golden hair was elegantly styled in an updo, and her emerald silk dress hugged her perfect figure. She tilted her head, her blue eyes filled with concern. "You look tense." Edward forced a smile. "I'm fine. It's just, today is a big day." Daniel Reed, his vice president and closest friend, walked over and clapped him on the shoulder. "A big day? Edward, this is the greatest day of your life. 10 long years. Now it's time for you to enjoy the fruits of your labor." Daniel smiled radiantly, the smile of a brother who had stood by him through thick and thin. Edward nodded, feeling a warmth in his heart. That was right. He wasn't alone. He had Vanessa, who had come and rekindled the light in his dark life. He had Daniel, the friend who had been there for him during his lowest moments. "Mr. Harris, a few words before the train departs," a reporter shouted. Edward stepped onto the podium, clearing his throat. He looked down at the crowd, then towards the silver train, sitting silently on track 1. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "the Phoenix Line is not just a railway. It is a promise of safety, of connection, and of a future where we will never have to say goodbye because of preventable tragedies." He couldn't finish his sentence before the cry rang out, sharp and desperate. "Don't get on the train. There's a bomb in the control cabin." Every other sound was sucked out. All eyes turned to the security fence, where a small, grimy figure had bravely darted through. It was a little girl, so thin that her oversized clothes looked like they were hanging on a hanger. Her hand still clutched a worn-out shoeshine box, her face gaunt, her eyes wide with terror. 2 burly security guards rushed towards her like hawks, easily tackling and restraining the girl on the cold stone floor. She struggled weakly. "Just some beggar kid causing trouble," Daniel said, his voice full of annoyance and contempt. "How embarrassing. Just let security handle it." Vanessa also put a hand to her mouth, her face full of fright. "Oh my God, poor thing. She must be out of her mind." Edward was about to dismiss it, about to signal for security to take the girl out of sight. His reason told him this was just a mean prank or the crazy talk of a street kid. But then, his eyes met hers. In that one moment, the world around him seemed to stop. He had seen those eyes before, Absolute horror, a silent desperation, a primal fear of death. He had seen it in the photos from the scene of his family's accident, in the eyes of the first firefighters who arrived. A cold feeling ran down his spine, signaling that something was terribly wrong. "Stop," he commanded. His voice wasn't loud, but it was low and full of authority, making the two security guards immediately freeze, looking at him in confusion. Ignoring the astonished whispers, Edward stepped down from the podium, moving through the crowd that parted like water. He walked straight to the girl and knelt on one knee, getting to her eye level. His $1,000 suit now touched the dirty floor. The entire grand station fell silent, with only the girl's frantic breathing audible. "What's your name?" he asked softly, trying not to scare her more. "Lily." The girl sniffled, her body still trembling under the weight of the security guard. "Let go of her," Edward commanded without looking up. The two men quickly complied. "Why did you say there's a bomb on the train, Lily?" Lily didn't answer right away. Her frightened eyes darted around, then landed on the beautiful blonde woman standing frozen not far away. Vanessa. The fear in her eyes seemed to multiply. She trembled and pointed towards Vanessa, her voice a shattered whisper, but loud enough for Edward to hear every word. "Last night, I saw her, in the old train car, with a strange man. She was the one who hurt my parents." The one who hurt my parents. That sentence was like a sledgehammer blow to Edward's mind. It wasn't just an accusation, it was an echo from the past, touching the deepest, most painful wound in his heart. He didn't know who this little girl was, what her story was, but his instinct, his pain, and his own memories screamed that this was not a lie. The horror in the girl's eyes could not be faked. He slowly stood up, turned around, and his eyes, sharp as daggers, looked directly at Daniel. "Delay the train. Immediately. Evacuate everyone." "Edward, are you crazy?" Daniel stepped forward, trying to maintain his composure. "This is our most important event. You can't just take the word of some street kid and—" "I said delay it." Edward roared, an anger he hadn't shown in 10 years exploding. His voice echoed through the hall, stunning everyone, including Vanessa and Daniel. In the ensuing chaos and confusion, Edward said nothing more. He turned back and scooped up the trembling Lily. She was feather-light, just skin and bones. He held her close, using his large body to shield her from the camera lenses pointed at them like gun barrels. He walked straight out to the emergency exit, leaving behind an empire on the brink of truth, a wife whose face had gone pale, and a friend whose smile had vanished. The door to the penthouse on the top floor of the Harris Tower slammed shut, separating them from the chaotic world outside. Inside, the silence was almost suffocating. Lily sat huddled at the edge of the massive leather sofa, looking even smaller and more out of place in the luxurious, cold space. She still clutched her worn-out shoeshine box, as if it were her only life raft in a foreign ocean. The scent of expensive leather and perfume in the room was a stark contrast to the smell of street dust on her clothes. Edward took off his suit jacket, tossing it onto a chair wearily. He poured a glass of hot milk from the automatic coffee maker and placed it on the table in front of Lily. "Drink this to warm up. You're safe now. It's safe here." Lily just glanced at the milk, then lowered her head again, her small shoulders trembling. Safe. The word safe had disappeared from her vocabulary a long, long time ago. Edward didn't push her. He went out to the balcony, pulled out his phone, and called the only person he could trust right now. "Mark, it's me." Mark Sullivan, the former chief security engineer for the corporation, was now retired and living peacefully in a suburb. His voice on the phone was as clear and reliable as ever. "Edward, what's wrong? You sound tense. I'm watching the news. The whole city's in an uproar because of you." "Mark, I need your help." Edward got straight to the point. "I need you to secretly check the control cabin of the train on track 1. Look for anything out of the ordinary. Anything." There was a brief silence. Mark knew Edward too well to think this was a random request. "Give me 30 minutes, Mark said resolutely. The 30 minutes of waiting felt like a century to Edward. He paced the room, occasionally glancing at Lily. The girl remained motionless. He wondered if he was insane. Had he just gambled his honor, his career, and a major event on the word of a child he had just met? Just as doubt began to gnaw at him, his phone vibrated. It was Mark. "You were right, Edward." Mark's voice was no longer calm. It was tense and chilling. "My God, you were right. There's a highly sophisticated, timed explosive device attached to the central control system. It's wrapped in lead to avoid normal scanners. It's designed to be triggered by GPS when the train enters the Blackwood Mountain Tunnel. The blast is powerful enough to turn the entire train into a fireball. No one would have survived. It would have looked exactly like a tragic accident, a system malfunction." Edward closed his eyes, his hand gripping the railing until his knuckles turned white. So it was true. Someone wanted to kill him. "Anything else, Mark?" "Yes," Mark continued, his voice almost a whisper. "I asked an old contact in the cybersecurity department to do a quick check on your recent financial transactions. Vanessa. Vanessa just used your electronic signature to purchase a 15 million USD life insurance policy 3 days ago. All procedures were done through a brokerage firm in the Cayman Islands. All traces were very carefully covered up." Edward hung up the phone. The feeling wasn't anger, but a terrifying emptiness. He remembered Vanessa's smiles, the hugs, the words of comfort she had given him. Was it all just an act? The love he thought had saved him turned out to be a knife, waiting to be plunged into his back. Just then, the doorbell rang. Edward started, and on reflex, he signaled for Lily to be quiet and hide behind the sofa. He looked at the security monitor. It was Daniel Reed. Edward took a deep breath, trying to calm himself, and opened the door. Daniel stepped inside, his face full of worry and urgency. "Edward, I heard. Are you okay? Where have you been? Everyone's looking for you. And where's that girl?" "The police said they need to question her." "She's here, with me," Edward replied, his voice as cold as ice, his eyes never leaving Daniel. Daniel looked around and saw Lily's messy hair bobbing up and down behind the sofa. He put on a fake smile, trying to seem friendly. "Hi, little one, don't be scared. I'll protect you. You were so brave." He didn't get a chance to take a step closer before Lily froze, seeing Daniel's face clearly under the light. Her whole body stiffened, her eyes wide with terror. The memory of that night in the damp old train car came rushing back with vivid clarity. This face, this voice. She frantically grabbed Edward's pant leg, her voice a trembling, fearful whisper. "Mr. the man who was with your wife that night." It was him. If the news about Vanessa was a knife thrust into Edward's heart, Lily's words were the knife twisting deeper, shattering everything that was left inside him. The traitor wasn't just the wife he loved, but also the brother, the best friend who had been with him through the darkest days after his family's death. 15 years of trust, 15 years of friendship, all just a deceitful act. Edward Harris's world collapsed for the second time. The change in Edward's eyes, from pain to cold fury, told Daniel that the game was up. He no longer pretended. The worried smile vanished, replaced by a cold, cruel expression. "You saw what you shouldn't have seen, you little brat," he muttered, his eyes on Lily filled with malice. Then he turned to Edward, his voice full of long-suppressed envy and resentment. "You never know when to quit, do you, Edward? It's always you. Always the center of everything, always the hero. Now it's time for you to pay for your arrogance." With that, Daniel turned, walked quickly to the door, and disappeared before Edward could react. The phone rang again, breaking the deadly silence. It was Mark. Daniel just used his highest-level administrator access to delete all security camera data in the abandoned harbor station area for the past 24 hours. He's erasing his tracks. And worse, I just got a tip from an old contact. A group of suspicious people are heading that way. Isn't that where the Lily girl usually stays? They're going there to clean up. You have to get her out of there now. Edward didn't hesitate for a second. He immediately understood the danger. They weren't just erasing tracks. They could also be going there to find and eliminate anyone who could be a witness. He scooped Lily up. "We have to go." He rushed out of the penthouse, down to the underground garage, and sped his sports car into the night. As the car exited the garage, he glanced in the rearview mirror. Two unmarked black SUVs immediately started their engines and fell in pursuit. A breathtaking chase ensued on the city's empty streets in the middle of the night. The roar of engines, the screech of tires on the asphalt. Edward had to use all his driving skills to weave through small alleys, trying to lose them. Lily, terrified, clung to him, her eyes squeezed shut. Edward realized this was no longer a personal plot to steal his fortune. This was a life-or-death battle against a well-planned, organized criminal group, and the trembling little girl beside him, the one society had forgotten, was the only key to taking them down. He had to protect her at all costs. The sky brightened after a long, sleepless night. The city woke up to an official announcement from the Harris Corporation. A minor technical issue has been fully resolved. The grand opening ceremony of the Phoenix Line will proceed as planned this noon. This news was like a sedative for the public and investors. But for Edward, Mark, and Lily, it was the start of the final act. They knew that Vanessa and Daniel, having failed to silence the witness, would never give up. They would act again, and this time it would be more public and more ruthless. "This is a huge gamble, Edward," Mark said over the phone, his voice full of worry. "We're using hundreds of people as bait." "I know," Edward replied, his eyes fixed on the window where unmarked police cars were quietly taking their positions. "But this is the only way to expose them. We won't give them a chance to escape." That noon, the central station was once again packed with people. The atmosphere was a bit more reserved than the day before, but the excitement was still there. Vanessa, in a fiery red dress, played the part of the anxious wife perfectly. She stood close to Edward, her arm linked in his, occasionally whispering words of comfort. "Are you sure everything is okay, my love? I'm still so shaken after yesterday." Her voice was convincingly shaky. "Everything is under control, my dear," Edward replied, his voice calm, but his hand in his pocket was clenched tight. He could feel the artificiality in every breath of the woman beside him. Lily, in a simple dress with her hair neatly tied back, sat in a secluded corner of the VIP area, right next to Mark. She looked like a lost child at an adult party. Mark, in the guise of a senior security officer, constantly spoke into a small hidden earpiece, coordinating an invisible security network. "All teams in position," his voice was low and clear. "Target Daniel Reed has entered the auxiliary control room on basement B. Target Vanessa Harris is next to the chairman. Hold your positions. Await my command." Edward stepped onto the podium for the second time in 24 hours. This time, his speech was brief. He thanked everyone for their trust and declared the first train, filled with dignitaries and journalists, officially departed. Applause erupted. The silver train slowly began to move. The stage curtain had opened. As the train traveled halfway through the station, the drama began. In the dark auxiliary control room in the basement, Daniel Reed sat in front of a complex array of computers. He smiled sinisterly. "It's showtime," he muttered, and began typing commands on the keyboard. On the train, the lights suddenly flickered and went out. The air conditioning stopped, and then a violent jolt sent all the passengers tumbling. The train suddenly accelerated, hurtling forward like an unbridled horse. Panicked screams filled the air. "What's happening? The brakes? Why isn't anyone stopping it?" The entire station fell into chaos. People pushed and shoved, trying to get off the platform. The official security force tried to calm the crowd, but it was no use. This was the scene of chaos that Vanessa and Daniel needed. In the midst of the panic, Vanessa played her part perfectly. She screamed in fear, letting go of Edward's arm. "Oh my God, Edward, we have to get out of here." but instead of running toward the exit, she moved skillfully, weaving through the pushing crowd, heading directly for her target. Lily. Mark realized her intention. He immediately pulled Lily behind him, forming a human shield. "Stay behind me, little one." Vanessa was now in front of them, her beautiful face contorted with anger and hatred. "Get out of the way, old man," she hissed. "I don't think so, Mrs. Harris," Mark replied, his voice chillingly calm. Everything happened in a flash. Taking advantage of a panicking man who bumped into Mark, Vanessa slipped past and grabbed Lily. She dragged the girl to a more secluded spot, behind a large marble pillar. Her other hand pulled out a small, sharp dagger hidden in her sleeve. The blade flashed deadly under the flickering lights. "You should have stayed out of grown-up business, you brat," Vanessa whispered, her voice venomous, leaning close to Lily's ear. "You ruined everything. Now, die." But just then, a large figure rushed forward. "Vanessa." Edward had anticipated this move. He lunged forward without a moment's hesitation, blocking Lily. His hand clamped down on Vanessa's knife-wielding wrist, squeezing it like an iron vice. "Let go," Vanessa screamed, struggling. Her elegant facade had completely vanished, replaced by the madness of a cornered beast. "It's all your fault. Yours and this filthy girl's. Everything should have been mine. The money, the company, everything." The struggle was fierce. Mark, standing not far away, had quietly activated the small voice recorder in his pocket. Vanessa's entire deranged confession, word for word, was being clearly recorded. At the same moment, in the central control room, Mark's engineering team yelled, "Found it! The interference signal is from an internal IP in Basement B. Regaining control. Okay, we have it back." On the tracks, the train that was hurtling towards the final wall screeched to a horrifying stop. The emergency brakes were activated, wheels sparking on the rails. The train came to a halt just inches from disaster. Immediately, doors from all sides of the station burst open. Dozens of armed police officers, who had been pre-positioned, stormed in. One team quickly subdued Vanessa, taking the knife from her hand. Another team, guided by Mark over the radio, rushed straight down to Basement B. They kicked down the door to the auxiliary control room, arresting Daniel as he sat motionless in front of a screen, displaying the words, "Access denied." The curtain had fallen. In the sudden silence of the station, all that remained was Edward's ragged breathing and Lily's soft sobs in his arms. The storm had passed. The flash of cameras outside the courthouse was a tempest, but inside the courtroom, the air was thick and solemn. Vanessa and Daniel, now stripped of their luxurious clothes and in orange prison uniforms, stood. Their arrogance and cruelty had vanished, replaced by the empty, soulless expressions of those who knew all exits were blocked. Mark's audio recording, along with witness testimony and irrefutable financial evidence, painted a complete and chilling picture. Vanessa's enraged confession not only incriminated her in the plot to kill Edward, but also revealed horrifying details about an organized crime syndicate. They had specialized in staging accidents from car crashes and fires to train derailments to fraudulently claim hundreds of millions of dollars in insurance money for nearly a decade. Lily's parents' death, which had been closed as a technical malfunction, was now exposed as a deliberate murder. Even the tragic accident that took Edward's first family 10 years prior was being reopened for investigation, planting a painful suspicion in his heart that it might not have been a mere coincidence. On the witness stand, Lily looked so small in a simple light blue dress. At first, her voice was shaky and soft. She recounted the horrifying night in the old train car, describing the faces of Vanessa and Daniel, and their whispers about a perfect accident. When the defense attorney tried to corner her, suggesting it was just the imagination of a traumatized child, Lily took a deep breath. She raised her head, looking directly at Vanessa, her clear eyes no longer fearful but filled with an unusual resolve. "Imagination doesn't make my parents disappear," she said, her voice suddenly clear and firm, echoing through the courtroom. Imagination doesn't make me live on the streets alone. I saw what I saw. And she was there. Silence filled the room. No one doubted her words anymore. Finally, the verdict was delivered. Vanessa and Daniel, along with other arrested members of the syndicate, faced multiple life sentences without parole for a long list of crimes: murder, attempted murder, insurance fraud, and organized criminal activity. The door of justice closed behind them. After everything was over, Edward didn't take Lily back to the luxurious penthouse. Instead, he took her to a quiet park where the autumn trees were shedding golden leaves. They sat on a wooden bench, silently watching children play in the distance. For a long time, no one spoke. Edward broke the silence first. "Lily," he began, his voice a little hesitant. I owe you a thank you." "No, many thank yous." Lily looked up at him, her eyes still tinged with sadness. "You saved my life," Edward continued, turning to look her directly in the eyes. "But more importantly, you did something even greater than that. For 10 years, I lived like a ghost, building a steel empire just to try and fill the emptiness in my heart. I stopped believing in anyone or anything, and then you appeared." He smiled, a genuine, warm smile for the first time in years. "You gave me a reason to believe again. You reminded me that courage and kindness still exist, even in the darkest of places." He took a deep breath, mustering his courage. "Lily, my family was shattered. Your family was, too. Maybe we could build a new one together. I want to adopt you. Can I be your family?" Lily was stunned. She stared at Edward, her lips trembling but unable to form a word. And then a single tear rolled down her thin cheek, then another. She no longer tried to hold it back. For the first time in years of wandering, after countless cold nights and hungry days, she cried. It wasn't the cry of pain or fear, but the cry of release, of happiness and comfort that she thought she had lost forever. She threw herself into Edward's arms, hugging him, burying her face in his jacket and sobbing. Edward wrapped his arms around her trembling, small body, patting her thin back. He was crying too. Two lonely people, two broken hearts, had finally found each other, found a place to call home, right in the middle of the windy park. A few weeks later, Edward made a decision that shocked the business world. He called an emergency board meeting and announced he was selling the majority of his shares in the corporation, giving up control of the empire he had spent his life building. "But why, Edward?" a bewildered board member asked. "The Phoenix Line is your legacy." Edward shook his head, a serene smile on his face. "I used to think so, but I was wrong. A steel empire can't warm a heart. A true legacy isn't what we build for ourselves, but what we build for others." He looked out the window, where Lily was waiting for him in the lobby. "I'm not going anywhere, but from now on, I want to build a different kind of legacy." Instead of skyscrapers, he wanted to build homes. Instead of railways, he wanted to build pathways to the future. Together with Lily, he established the Little Shoes Foundation, an organization dedicated to protecting, nurturing, and giving opportunities to street children across the country. His legacy was no longer high-speed trains but rescued lives, and that, he realized, was the most meaningful journey of his life. 7 years passed as quickly as a bullet train. The world had changed, the city had changed, and so had people. The Harris Corporation, under new management, continued to thrive, but Edward Harris's name was no longer associated with cold steel tracks. His name, along with his adopted daughter Lily Harris, had become a symbol of something else, much warmer and more enduring. The Little Shoes Foundation, from a young organization founded on pain and betrayal, had now grown into one of the leading children's charities in the country. They had built dozens of homes, awarded thousands of scholarships, and most importantly, given hope to countless children who once thought the world had forgotten them. Lily, now a beautiful and radiant 8-year-old, stood on the stage of the Foundation's annual gala. She was no longer the skinny, timid shoeshine girl she once was. Instead, she was a confident young woman with bright eyes and a warm smile. She wore a simple yet elegant evening gown, her long hair neatly braided. She had been accepted into a prestigious university, but she decided to dedicate a year to working full-time for the Foundation before starting. When I was a child, Lily began her speech, her clear and emotional voice echoing through the luxurious hall. I used to think my voice was too small for anyone to hear. I used to think this world was run by powerful people, and people like me were just invisible specks of dust. She paused, her eyes looking down at the front row, where Edward was sitting, smiling at her with immense pride. But then I learned an important lesson, she continued. I learned that courage isn't measured by status or wealth. It's measured by whether you dare to speak the truth, even when your voice trembles. That night at the station, I was so scared, but the fear of seeing another tragedy repeat itself was even greater, and that one small act changed everything. Our legacy, she concluded, her voice full of emotion, is not the numbers on a financial report. Our legacy is the smiles, the dreams we've helped take flight, the belief that every child, no matter where they come from, deserves a chance. Our legacy is turning pain into strength. The entire hall rose for a thunderous standing ovation. Edward also stood, his eyes filled with tears of pride and happiness. The story of the fateful train became a city legend, a modern-day fairy tale told over and over again. It reminded everyone that heroes can appear from the most unexpected places. At the central station where it all began, a small bronze statue was erected. The statue didn't depict a powerful CEO or a great politician. It immortalized the extraordinary moment that changed everything. A shoeshine girl looking up at a wealthy man who was kneeling, patiently and intently listening to her. A simple inscription was carved at the base, where a silent voice changed the world. The statue became a favorite destination for both city residents and tourists, a symbol of hope and courage. One late autumn day, on the 7th anniversary of their meeting, Edward and Lily returned to the station. They were no longer the center of attention. Now, they were simply a father and a daughter, walking together, sharing stories and smiles. They stopped in front of the statue. A boy of about 10, in a school uniform, was using his small handkerchief to carefully wipe a thin layer of dust from the face of the girl in the statue. Lily smiled, walked over, and asked, "Hi, what are you doing?" The boy looked up, his eyes clear and intelligent. "My mom says this statue is very important," the boy replied seriously. "She says it reminds us that even when we feel small and unheard, the voice of truth is the most powerful sound in the world, and we must always listen, because sometimes the smallest people are the bravest." The boy looked at Edward and Lily, not recognizing who they were. "Isn't this a great statue?" Edward smiled, a look of contentment and peace on his face. He squeezed Lily's hand. In that moment, he knew for sure that his true legacy was not in cold steel tracks or skyscrapers. It was not something that could be bought with money or built with power. His legacy was here, in the words of this stranger boy, in the story passed from one generation to the next. It was in the flame of hope they had kindled together from the ashes of betrayal, a flame that was now spreading and warming the hearts of others, and that was true immortality.